When they were asked why they had joined the ranks of the Hidden Army, these women gave a variety of reasons.
I have a daughter in the waves, and I had a son on the Arizona. That's a good enough reason for anyone.
My mom died in 1999, and in the year after she died, I had all of her things, and they were in my attic. I started going through them, and I came across this envelope marked Saipan Pictures and Diary. And I knew what it was, because I knew she had been in the Red Cross during World War II in Saipan, but I'd never seen this. It just all came together, sitting on the attic floor, that this is something my mother, it's a legacy that she left for me. You know, and as a writer, I was able to take it a step farther, make it into something for other people, so that they could see, you know, the lives of their mothers. I think for my mother, and probably for a lot of other women, World War II presented opportunities. It presented opportunities that wouldn't have opened up otherwise.
Women entirely came into their own, shall we say. If you helped pack packages or something like that, you were doing something.
My mother talked about having weekly meetings with her friends, women friends, and at times they would gussy themselves up and take pictures to send overseas. They would write letters to men they didn't even know.
We were not exactly welcome by the men, but they had to finally accept us, and when the scales fell from their eyes, they finally realized that some women were even better than they.
All you do here is take tests, millions of them.
Well, they have to classify you, dear. Find out what you can do best.
I told him I'm a jalopy expert.
I bet I'm a typist till the day I die.
Those things I do best to raise children and cook. Well, I think they'll let you cook.
When we were shopping in Washington, when we would go shopping in the various clothing stores, a lot of the salespeople would just not see us. We were invisible. They just didn't want to have anything to do with us, didn't want to wait on us. And getting on the streetcars, and we were always rather pushed back. You know, we were always, people would push ahead of us. You know, we were just invisible to them. They didn't like us because we took the jobs of their sons. We put their sons in the active service in the war, to be shot at, in other words. And there was a lot of dissension about that.
In the Mediterranean, at Anzio, for example, there were Army nurses in the front lines at hospitals. There were nurses killed at Anzio. It had nothing to do with the fact that women should be home, that those girls were there. They were serving a purpose, much as any sailor would.
I just announced at dinner one night to the family that I was going to learn how to fly. And my dad said, honey, that's awfully expensive. This was the Depression. I said, no. I saw an ad in the paper today and learned to fly for $50. He said, well, that's a come on, you know. And he said, why do you want to learn how to fly? And this was off the top of my head. I said, Dad, someday there's going to be a terrible accident. And I said, there's going to be people dying. And the only way we could save their lives is we got to get them to a hospital right away. And the only way they could get there is somebody's got to fly them there. I'm going to do that. That was my honest-to-God answer.
The fire department were there, they sprayed the airplane, the ambulance came, and I said, I'm just fine, there's nothing wrong with me. And they said, well, we'll take you back to base ops so you can fill out a report. And there was the whole base there, and the base ops guy came out and he said, well, congratulations. And I said, I didn't desert the airplane. It needs a little bit cleaning up, but it's going to be okay. And then he said, why don't you guys take her up to the officers club and get her a Bloody Mary? That was how that ended.
At 25 years old, 24 when she made the decision, she chose to go to war. To me, that's a kind of bravery that I don't know if I have. And to see it that way and really recognize that every woman that was alive during that time had to make some really big choices.
And I got so annoyed because all the farmer boys came home to work on the farm so they would not be drafted. And I thought this was terribly unpatriotic of them, and I would show them. So I applied to the Red Cross because I knew that the Red Cross allowed women to go overseas, which was not true of the other branches of the service. And you could limit how long you were there. In the other services, I think it was 4 years. It just sounded like a better job to me. It was a job that took a lot of maturity, and I matured fast when I got in.
They were called Red Cross Girls. The Red Cross girls had the responsibility of the morale of the troops. That was part of their responsibility. If you think about a general, he also has that responsibility.
So we tried to make their life as pleasant as we could. In addition to the club, those of us who were in the Red Cross also went out on ships at night to put on parties because many big ships couldn't come in and the men would have no way to get to shore. And so that was, I remember saying I worked an 18-hour day, and it was just about true because many nights we went out on the ships to give parties.
The "we will show them" was a part of what was part of our generation. They just don't know. It wasn't that we didn't believe in ourselves. We had grown up feeling equal and feeling, if anything, cocky about who we were. And they just don't know yet. One day they'll learn. I think that kind of thing has sort of followed me through my whole life. You know, my race may have been a problem for somebody else, but it wasn't a problem for me. You know, one day they'll learn.
Life's full of consequence, but who's scared of consequence? Let's sip the honey while it's sweet. We could be messing round, but you is digressing round while I'm tossing nature at your feet.
And her most, I suppose, typical but surprising event in her World War II life was when she went to entertain black troops at a camp in Arkansas and wound up, she said to the people in charge, who are all these white soldiers sitting in the front rows? Because normally she would entertain just all black soldiers. They said, oh, these aren't soldiers, these are German prisoners of war. And the black GIs were sitting behind the German prisoners of war. She said, I'm not singing here. And she walked out and she demanded to see the NAACP, which was one woman, Daisy Bates, who later was the hero of the Little Rock High School desegregation. My mother wanted to fight this as best she could, as did every black GI want to fight this. But there were great black firsts. There were the first black pilots, the first black tank corps members, the first black Marines, the first black Navy officers, and of course the first black women in the Waves and the WACs. They were extraordinary. The first black wave was a friend of the family. She was engaged all through the war to my great uncle, who was a sergeant in the Army. And her name was Lieutenant Harriet Pickens, and I was in love with her uniform. I thought I just hope the war lasts long enough so that I can grow up and be a wave.
Virginia Hall was not only so brave and so full of courage, but she was this master of disguise. She disguised herself as a French peasant, very unattractive, kerchiefs over her head, big billowy skirts, 3 or 4 layers on the top to try and make herself look heavier, quite different from the way she normally looked. Also, those big skirts would help disguise the way she walked. She had a herd of goats. She was a shepherdess. She was up and down these back roads in the Loire Valley. She was counting Germans. She was looking at troop movements. She was also a very skilled radio operator, and she was sending these messages back to the Allies.
Let's see, they came to our house when they took my father, and it's always like 2 or 3 in the morning, you know. Men in their fedora hats, and I remember vividly one of the men came over to my bed, and he pulled the cover off, and he says, "Is this a boy or a girl?" And I was just frozen. And they did go about the house. I don't know what they were looking for, but my father then just changed his clothes, and that was the last we saw of him for years.
5 of us worked together with my mother, and we went to Santa Anita. Santa Anita's a racetrack, and we lived in a horse stall. It was very hot and dusty and dirty.
I look back and I really see the strength in some of those women. And you have to remember that the women had to take over, you know, the first generation, like my father, they were taken away. Our brothers were either drafted or were the first ones to be able to go to school. So the women became heads of the family.
I think it was Ann Richards who said, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in heels. And I really believe that applies to the women of World War II. Everything that they were allowed to do, and I use the word allowed very deliberately, they did. And often they had to do it better than the men to prove that they could. At that time, no one believed that women could work in factories. No one believed that women could serve in the military. And so every woman that stepped into all these pioneering roles had to do it with no role models. They had to make their own way.